Welcome to the Power of 10. We're glad you joined us. Before we begin, let's go over the features of the platform you're using today. On the left side is the video window. On the right of the screen, you will see two tabs, Chat and Q&A. We encourage you to be an active member in today's discussion. Use the chat window to say hello to the panel and fellow attendees. Use the Q&A window to submit your questions for the panel. If you have an interest in a question already entered, click the Upvote button. That will make the question rise in priority. Now that we've gone over the platform features, let's begin.
Nashville International Airport is a vital transportation hub dedicated to meeting the needs of passengers in Middle Tennessee and throughout the world. At BNA, we're thinking about what Nashville needs for the next decade and beyond. Our expansion and renovation plans are designed to meet the increasing travel demands of our state. The new Grand Lobby marks the return of one central checkpoint at BNA and offers breathtaking new artwork reflecting the essence of Middle Tennessee. New concessions, retail options, and more. Our newest construction and renovation program, New Horizon, is designed to meet the unprecedented growth and needs of passengers. The project will include the expansion of concourses A and D, terminal roadway improvements to alleviate traffic, and more. Our focus remains on providing a seamless and elevated journey to our passengers. While BNA continues to make tremendous progress, notable strides are being made at our sister airport, John C. Toon, the largest general aviation airport in the state. Since the devastation of the tornado in March 2020, we've completed our recovery and redevelopment plan, Toon Taking Off. This $35.8 million investment includes 100 hangars, 28 tie-downs, a $3.5 million ramp expansion, and more. Serving more than 18.4 million passengers this past year, BNA is a vital gateway to Middle Tennessee, and we remain committed to providing the best travel experience for today and years to come.
Hello, welcome to the Power of 10 Forum Series. I'm Robbie Hayes, Chairman of the Board of Directors of Cumberland Region Tomorrow, a nonprofit organization that works to improve the quality of life in our 10-county region. We are excited to engage with you and address some of the most important issues facing our region. We are thankful to the panelists who share their time and expertise with us and you during these discussions. And we are very grateful for our sponsors and all of our supporters who make this series possible. We hope you engage in these discussions and work with us to make our region an even better place to call home.
Hello, and are we ready to get started? Hello, and welcome to the Power of 10 Forum Series hosted by Cumberland Region Tomorrow. I'm Anita Wadhwani. I'm a reporter at the Tennessee Lookout based in Nashville. And as we all know, our region is experiencing rapid growth and development. And that growth is significantly impacting agriculture. What we hope to do today in this forum is to explore some of the challenges farmers are facing, as well as the potential policies and programs that could help preserve agricultural lands and support new farmers. Before we begin, I've been reminded to first thank Nashville International Airport for sponsoring this forum. Without their support, we wouldn't be having this discussion today. And thanks, of course, to all of CRT's supporters. We have a great panel today. With us first is Kevin Ferguson with the UT Extension, Brooks Lamb with the American Farmland Trust, Emily Parrish with the Land Trust for Tennessee, and Mayor Billy Vogel, who is the county executive in Robertson County. Thank you all for being here. I thought we would start first with Brooks. to maybe set the stage about what's happening in Tennessee right now. Brooks, could you help us understand the big picture, the biggest drivers to farmland loss in Tennessee right now as we experience such rapid growth and development?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Anita. I really appreciate it. And thanks again to CRT for having us on for this really important conversation today. I wanted to first just mention that I grew up on a farm in Marshall County. My wife and I are also looking to try to get back on a farm somewhere in Middle Tennessee, hopefully in the next few years. So this is an issue that is something I care about professionally, but also care about personally. So really glad to be here discussing it. So first, I'll offer a little bit of context on the farmland conversion and farmland loss situation nationally. So last summer, American Farmland Trust released a groundbreaking report describing the state of American farmland, and using findings from 2001 to 2016. So we analyzed how much farmland loss occurred during that 15-year period. We were able to project forward to see how farmland conversion is going to affect communities across the country between then and 2040. So our data found that between 2016 and 2040, the United States is poised to convert or compromise over 18 million acres of agricultural land. That is a really alarming statistic. Narrowing in a little bit to our home here in Tennessee, Tennessee is expected, if we continue along those same trends, to convert just over 1 million acres of agricultural land between 2016 and 2040. That would equal about 8% of all of Tennessee's farmland converted during that roughly 20-year time period. There are also a projection where that conversion actually worsens. That projection is not unrealistic, especially given recent growth trends in places like Middle Tennessee, the announcement of the Blue Oval City plant out in West Tennessee, a lot of factors. And that projection shows that we could convert close to 1.4 million acres over the next 20 years. So it's really a concern. Several things I think are driving that. One is what Anita referenced in her question, is the explosive growth that we've seen in Tennessee. We have a lot of people moving to our state. It's nice to have people wanting to move here. It can be a little bit of a problem when the growth isn't done compactly. So lots of folks are moving in. We're seeing both traditional sprawl, kind of what you imagine when you see a city slowly taking on a little bit more of the outskirts, developing, sprawling out. But that's actually not what is driving most of the farmland conversion and farmland loss in Tennessee. And this is one of the things that makes American Farmland Trust's data really interesting. We're able to show that it's actually low density residential development, things like 3 and 5 and 10 and 15 acre lots, maybe with one house on those lots, that is really driving most of the farmland conversion in Tennessee. So it's a 100-acre farm being broken into 25 acre tracts. A few other things that are really driving that farmland loss. One is high prices for agricultural land. So I have a new book out. It's called Love for the Land, Lessons from Farmers Who Persist in Place. And in conversations with farmers for that book, I heard time and time again that farmers are getting unsolicited calls offering them $20 and $30 and sometimes $40,000 an acre for their land. Sometimes it's really hard to turn that money down, especially when you're running on tight economic margins. Another parallel issue with those high prices is that it is really difficult for new and beginning and young farmers to be able to purchase farmland. So oftentimes when someone passes who owns a farm, and the family decides they want to sell that land, it's really hard to compete with a deep-pocketed developer who can pay an almost unlimited amount of money for land if you're wanting to buy that land and live on it and farm it. So that is a real challenge. And we've also seen continuing challenges with maintaining economically viable small and mid-sized farms in Tennessee. And that's kind of roughly farms that are 50 to 500 acres, somewhere in that range. And that has been a trend that has been affecting the entire country for a long time. It seems to have exacerbated in the last several years. So these small and mid-sized farms, which are most susceptible to farmland loss, are dealing with the kind of between a rock and a hard place issues of lots of development pressure that really threatens their existence, as well as agricultural consolidation that makes it difficult for them to survive. So it's really a lot of things that are affecting farmland loss and driving it here in Tennessee.
Thanks, Brooks. Mayor Vogel, I'm really curious about how much of what Brooks was talking about you're seeing playing out in your county, which is, I understand it, has a longstanding farming tradition. And I wondered if you could speak to especially the challenges that you have as a county executive who has to manage multiple and maybe even competing interests in terms of the desire for development as well as the desire to preserve agricultural land.
Thank you. That's a good question. I think about that question every day. This county's got more cities in it than any county in the state. Robson County does. And one of our problems is I went to a chamber meeting this morning, and I've got an invite to the Robson County Association of Realtors. We're a sales tax state, and I've got 10 cities fighting over them sales tax dollars. So as they annex, they want more rooftops. And it takes rooftops to get to quality steakhouses, Publix, and situations like that. So they're wanting this kind of growth. But I've got probably 5 or 6 small cities that do not want this kind of growth. They're happy where they're at. And in fact, they would like to stay small, but they need the sales tax dollars to operate on, because most of them don't have a property tax. And it puts the county in a very bad situation because we don't get a lot of sales tax or commercial because the cities get it. And all we have is property tax. But Brooks hit it right on the head. We had a meeting Tuesday night about our budget and setting the tax rate. And we had a courtroom full of people. 90% of them was transplants that had just moved into Robson County that did not want their taxes raised. They came out of cities with high tax rates, and they come into our county, which they have found us. It used to be south of Nashville, but now they've come in our way. They think that we can keep operating like Mayberry, but the more people come in, we can't. 4% of your population will always be incarcerated. I was told last month that I'm gonna have to build another courtroom because of the growth we're having. We had to have more officers, and next year I've got to put the 9th ambulance in service because every 10,000 people you got to have an ambulance. Well, to buy an ambulance and stock it's $750,000 with personnel. So that's what we're fighting as a county that has a lot of agriculture, but the small farmers are being weeded out by the big farmers. They can't afford. This morning I had a guy that had 20 cows. He said, "What am I going to do?" He said, "I cannot buy the equipment it takes to roll the hay, and I can't find anybody to roll my hay because everybody's going to row crop because row crop renting prices now is exceeding $300 an acre. And when that weeds your mom and pop farms out, and everybody's going to corporation farming. And I'm seeing that real happening a lot in this county. Brooks brought up about the green belt. 15 acres is the green belt, and everybody wants to be in the green belt. But I've got a lot of folks coming to me wanting to raise the green belt up to 25 acres, 30 acres. Well, the 15-acre people will probably start tracking up then because they'll have to pay regular property taxes like somebody that's just got a yard or something or 5 acres. So it's very, very challenging with 10 mayors and all of them going in different directions. I have farmed all my life. I've got cattle. I got a cattle farm, and I'm planning on putting most of my farm in the farm trust where it can never be developed. It can be sold to farm, but you can't never develop it. And that's what I want to do, preserve that for my grandchildren to have a place they can get on the river. But it's very challenging here in Robson County because 60% of my people work in Nashville. So they're living here, but they're going to Nashville and probably spending most of their money. That's where they work. So the chamber and my industrial board is trying to do jobs in Robson County. And to do that, I got to have rooftops. So it's a balance that I don't know the answer to. But as Nashville expands, we'll finally be like Atlanta, where every county around it will be part of Nashville. And I see that coming because we can't compete with the people that's coming in right now and buying the farmland up for $30,000 40, and like Brooks said, up to 50. I know a farmer that had a Century farm, and he told me, "I'll never sell this farm for development." Well, somebody came to him about 2 years ago and offered $50,000 an acre, They tracked it up to put 4 houses on an acre because he did have the infrastructure that could be done. And he signed it. He signed the paper. He said, I got no choice. My family does not want to fight this farming every year. So that's a very good question. And I'll take questions if they want to ask me, but it's a balancing act that I think about every day. And I don't know the answer when we join a big metropolitan government.
Thanks, Mayor. I guess I'll ask you, Kevin, because I understand you do a lot of one-on-one conversations with current farmers and people who are hoping to become farmers. What are they telling you? What are you talking about? What are their biggest concerns and their challenges right now?
Well, thank you, Anita. I appreciate the opportunity to share. And yes, I've worked for 37 years as a farm management specialist, working directly with farmers one-on-one, looking at their management, marketing, finance. And, right now it's another year of price volatility, especially in the row crop industry. We're seeing narrow margins, input costs. Everyone knows where interest rates are now compared to where they have been historically the past few years. They're facing labor challenges like a lot of folks are as well. We also have times, of fuel, fertilizer, equipment costs being higher. There's probably one bright spot, I guess, in the ag industry right now in the state, and that is historically record high beef cattle prices. But part of that is because of the misfortune of others, because there's been droughts in other parts of the U.S. that's greatly reduced the herd of cattle. We're at a really short supply of beef cattle. I will say, I think Brooks mentioned it a little bit, the smaller scale, but we're also seeing a real increase in some smaller scale value added direct to consumer operations that are out there. Well, and when we talk about transition, it's with times of tight margins, it's difficult to transition into a younger generation as well. And I often mention that tradition is a great obstacle in production agriculture. And it's tradition that farmers don't talk about transition planning. Matter of fact, the information that we have, only about 15% of existing farms have any kind of plan for transitioning their farm into a next generation. It makes it difficult also, as already been mentioned, on the beginning farmers, the new and beginning farmers. I do think we'll continue to see trends. We'll have the 2024 Census of Ag, or the 2022 Census of Ag out probably in early 2024. I think we'll probably see another increase in average age of the primary owner, probably be over 60 years of age. And we'll probably continue to see that trend of fewer farms, average size of farms being to increase. The mayor mentioned, and it's really difficult to define a corporate farm. If we look at the actual data, less than 5% of the farms in the U.S. are non-family corporations. But I think what the mayor is referring to is just the size and scope of some of the farms are getting larger. Even if they're owned solely by a family, they're getting larger. And we see that. That's the consolidation in agriculture that's happening. And as already been mentioned, the high land values are putting families in kind of difficult decisions. Do they sell and greatly improve their net worth? Or do they try to find some way to transition and keep farming? And oftentimes if they sell, and this is the thing that makes it difficult for them, it's an end to that farm and that family's legacy. And that's a great challenge that's out there for them. Thanks, Anita.
Thanks, Kevin. Emily, the mayor talked about wanting to put his farm in a trust to preserve it in perpetuity from development. And so I guess that's something that I wanted to talk to you about. Can you tell us about the work of the Land Trust of Tennessee and talk a little bit about the benefits or even limitations of conservation easements?
Sure, happy to. Yes, I'm Emily Parrish. I'm the vice president here at the Land Trust for Tennessee. We're a statewide conservation organization, and we're a nonprofit that works all across the state, which is a huge area, as you can imagine. to conserve land. The primary tool that we use to conserve land is called a conservation easement. So don't necessarily be misled by the word trust in our name, because I think a lot of people hear that word and, well, sometimes people think we're a bank, which is funny, but also, it's different than maybe a legal or a family trust you might set up on your own. So we use a separate legal tool called a conservation easement, primarily to conserve land. And what that is really, at the end of the day, a legal agreement between the landowner and the land trust. And the purpose of that is to conserve the property's conservation values. And that could vary. As I said, we are statewide. We also work on a lot of different types of conservation efforts, but a big part of what we do is working lands, working farms, and working forests. And so the conservation easement is tailored to each specific property in order to protect that particular property's conservation values, which can be agricultural land, scenic value, watershed protection, habitat. Sometimes it's all of those things overlapping. Obviously, we know a lot of our farms have multiple wonderful values to them. And then the other purpose of the conservation easement is to limit development on that property. So in order to protect those conservation values, we are limiting future development. And so we do that by spelling out how many future structures can be built on the property. Definitely residential is pretty limited, but people can reserve the right to build additional residences, and then can build additional agricultural buildings, recreational structures. But the conservation easement will limit that property from being, covered with houses or covered with industrial commercial development in the future. We also try to limit the division of land through that conservation easement. So trying to keep those larger land tracts intact, so that we don't end up with what Brooks was talking about, the 10 and 15 acre lots. And so in Tennessee, that's a voluntary option, obviously, for people. It's a choice. We never tell people they have to conserve their land. It's just an alternative for families to consider when they are faced with these choices. It is one of the choices they could make. And the conservation easement runs with the deed. So whoever buys that property or whoever inherits that property, they are also subject to those restrictions. So it is one legal tool that is intended to last forever. And that's where our job comes in, is to make sure future owners of that property understand the conservation easement and follow it as well, to try to keep that land open forever. So.
Can you give us a sense, Emily, of how widely adopted these easements are, and are they a hard sell?
I would say, nationally, there are about 1,000 land trusts working all across this country and have protected millions and millions of acres. So it's a very successful tool, and it can be very high leverage. It's much easier to protect a farm this way than, let's say, the state or the county trying to buy, or us trying to buy all these farms. So it can be a much more cost-effective way to conserve land. There are ways to incentivize landowners to consider this option. One we depend heavily on here in Tennessee is there is a federal income tax deduction that can be associated with doing this. Because you are giving up, the IRS recognizes you are giving up significant value when you restrict your land in this way. So at a base, everyone could be eligible for that federal income tax deduction. And unfortunately in Tennessee, we don't have a whole lot of other incentives for people. There are places around this country, even some of our neighboring states, where landowners get significant cash to protect their land. So maybe they can get tax benefits, but maybe they can also have some cash purchase of a conservation easement. Some counties and cities have programs like that around the country. Some are statewide programs. Some states also have adopted an additional state tax credit, which can be an additional layer on top of those other incentives. So there are some great ways to incentivize landowners, great models out there. Unfortunately, we don't have quite as many here in Tennessee as we would hope. So we're really depending on landowners who want to voluntarily enter into a conservation easement and may take advantage of those federal income tax benefits. But beyond that, we don't have as many incentives as we would like.
Yeah, and I might jump in really quickly, Anita, too, to just share one thing. I think everything Emily shared is really helpful. And I'll also say, there can be benefits for aspiring farmers when other farmers protect their land with conservation easements. So as Emily was saying, that conservation easement is going to lower the resale value of that land because you can't sell it and put a subdivision or a Dollar General or a strip mall or anything like that. So its limited use is curtailed. So it makes it more accessible for a new and beginning farmer to buy land at an agriculturally appropriate price instead of having to compete with those developers who might be trying to transform the landscape. So especially when those are purchased, so it helps the current owners maybe retire with confidence and actually have some income to go into retirement. It helps people who are looking for land because they might be able to buy it at a lower price. There's a lot of layered values of that approach.
Thanks, Brooks. I was really struck, Mayor, by, your description of all the competing interests and the limitations that you have to, as the county mayor. But there are tools that cities and counties have in terms of planning and land restrictions or use restrictions. And I'm just kind of curious, like, what tools you do have in your toolbox, and if they're not working for you, are there new tools that you wish you had, new tools you might be able to develop?
Okay, for instance, most counties have an impact fee, and what that is, we try not to raise taxes on all of our citizens, like our older citizens that have paid taxes all their life and lived in Robeson County. So when a developer builds a house, we'll put an impact fee on it. Ours is $2 a foot right now. And really, that sounds like a lot, but when you're paying $250 a foot to build a house, $2 to give it to the county, in which we use it to build schools, that's not a whole lot of money. You can raise that up or lower it. It depends on how the economy's doing. It's like a thermostat. If things are slow, we can lower that if we want to increase building. And if it's getting where we can't handle the growth, we can raise it up. A lot of counties have raised theirs up. Some of the surrounding counties below Nashville have raised theirs up quite a bit, but it didn't slow it down much. The people that are coming in here from other states where they have sold their property are, right now our property is still even at $30,000 acre for them is a good value. But we do, we've got like R20, which is housed on 20,000 square feet, but you got to have sewer. And when you got sewer, you can stack your houses closer. It makes, you can put 500 houses on 100 acres. But then when you do that, you're looking at a school. So a lot of people don't want to live that close. And some people want to live on 15 acres. It's a guessing game about how to do the impact fee. Of course, developers don't like it, and real estate agents are not happy about it because it will slow down growth some. But usually, when the interest rate gets like they are, the banks start raising those fees and stuff. That'll slow it down too. But right now, and hey, the way we're growing around Nashville, some of these factors, interest rate stuff, are not really a big deterrent toward it. What it is, you can't tell us, man, he can't sell his land. Infrastructure is a big thing. I've got cities that make their money off of gas, sewer, water, and electricity. So they need rooftops to keep expanding and feeding, like feeding the pigs, They need more feed to feed. So it's the smaller cities that don't want the growth, they depend on the commercial. So they want the big stores, but to get them steakhouses and stuff, you got to have rooftops to support that. So it's a balance. It's not, I don't know, it ain't there yet. But eventually we will probably lose this battle because we're just too close. And right now we're too popular. People love Tennessee and they're coming here. And we got a great state. We've been blessed, but I think we're going to share the blessing, sounds like. Thank you.
What about, and I think this is a question for whoever wants to jump in, but are there policies, procedures, legislation on the state level that can begin to address some of this farmland loss?
There's probably not, but that would probably have to come from the state about the cities doing all the annexing they're doing. But county cannot annex land, but a city can. But once they get it, maybe they said, hey, I took on too much. They try to give it back, but this county's, our CTAS ask us not to do that. Because usually they take the land, but they won't take the road. They want somebody to keep the road up. And that's where the county comes in. That's one of the problems we're having here in Robinson County. The guy builds 500 houses, but he don't take the road, and then we're the ones that's got to try to do something about signals and turning lanes. And right now, TDOT's got their plate put full. So TDOT's got a big job, and so does TDEC with the work in the ground. But sewer's the secret. If you got sewer, you can put more houses without spreading them out. I'm against a house being built on an acre lot out in rural areas where there's not sewer. If that house is, let's say, a brick home and it's there 60 years, that acre of ground will not hold the sewage that will come out of that house. And he's going to have to do more just for that one house. So I think the infrastructure that President Biden did will solve a lot of that around the cities. But when they do that, they put extra pressure on the county to furnish the services that these people need.
Yeah, so I'll jump in quickly too and add on to Mayor Vogel's comments just really briefly. I think he's right that a lot of this work has to be done at the local level. A few things the state might be able to do is one, and Emily alluded to this, some of our neighboring states have purchase of agricultural conservation easements that can actually compensate farmers to make protecting their land a little more attractive. That's one thing that could be done. In terms of next generation farmers too, getting more farmers onto the land instead of seeing that land transition. There is a program called Tennessee Farm Link, but right now it gets such little funding that it's really hard for it to have a big impact. And so maybe funding that program a little bit more. And then as Mayor Vogel was saying, lots of work at the local level. Maybe some larger minimum lot sizes in rural areas. We could adopt agricultural districts or agricultural conservation districts where it incentivizes people to keep their land open. There are some things, but I think Mayor Vogel was right. A lot of it needs to be done at the local level.
Brooks, if I could add just one thing about the infrastructure, just something that was shared with me this week by one of the farmers is that he's a row crop farmer, but there's so much traffic on the road with the small 2-lane roads. A lot of times their window to move traffic is between 9 and 2. 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. is the time that they think it's safest with less traffic, less problem to move their equipment from one place to another. And to address kind of that disparity in the age, the actual census of data will show the last information for every principal operator under the age of 25. There's 27 that's over 75 years of age. But again, it's the fact that how can we encourage also the farm families to discuss transition planning at a much earlier age than what is the normal when people get in their 60s, 70s, or 80s. If we can start that planning process much earlier, there's a lot of estate planning tools that can be useful and more useful with that time frame.
Emily, I don't know if you wanted to add any more about what it looks like in other states about those easement policies.
I think several of us have touched on it, but yeah, there are other ways to incentivize people to conserve land, and it doesn't have to be through permanent easements. You can do that through things like zoning and planning. You can do it through agricultural districts and zones, like Brooks mentioned. Probably a fresh look at how, greenbelt or property tax incentives for landowners as well. I mean, there's creative policies all over the country to look at for that. I think we've touched on most of them that I can think of. Brooks, can you think of any more that stand out to you?
One thing that does stand out that American Farmland Trust has done some work on in other places are what we call plans for agriculture, or farmland protection plans, where a community comes together and tries to envision a future for agriculture in their community, so that they have a future in agriculture. And it's a little different from a comprehensive plan, which are very important from a land use standpoint, but it also looks at things like agricultural economic development and trying to transition land to the next generation, and how can we promote sound practices so that we have good stewardship of resources in our community. So those stand out as something that might be useful too, but I think we've touched on a lot of the tools.
I'm just kind of curious, and maybe this is like a very basic question, but who do small farmers talk to? Who do they get advice from, and how do they know where to go to get it in terms of their kitchen table issues, as well as, they're in counties sometimes, in some instances where they see this encroaching development and maybe are not quite sure how to navigate the future.
Can I take that? There is a University of Tennessee Extension office located in every county in the state, and they're equipped with agricultural agents that's there and willing to assist them. I would direct them to the University of Tennessee Extension website. Just do a search. Also, it was asked earlier about where you can get information. Check out the UT Center of Farm Management website as well. We have a 9-person team across the state that works directly one-on-one with farmers. We have a program called Farming Fundamentals that's solely directed to beginning farmers about where do you find resources, what's the process you would go through in evaluating land, is it suitable for a farm? That program is all online, although we also now, it was created during COVID, so it started online, but we have those across the state in person. We also have a program called Master Farm Manager that talks about the financial aspects and borrowing money and things like that. So reach out to your local extension office. Like I said, one's located in every state, and they can help you with the resources, because it is very confusing with all the different agencies that are out there and where you can find assistance.
And I feel bad for jumping in so much. I'm trying to resist that temptation. I just care about all these things so much. First, I would echo Kevin. Check out UT Extension. They do great work. And then share 2 other quick things. One, we found through a lot of research that farmers learn from other farmers. And so the more we can empower farmers to share their success stories and talk about their challenges, the better off the entire agricultural community can be. So that was the first thing. And then second thing, there's actually a piece of federal legislation being considered now. It's called the Office of Small Farms Establishment Act. And this would create an Office of Small Farms within the USDA to specifically focus on making sure federal resources are available and accessible for small farms. And I think it kind of classifies that as farms that are under 180 acres. So I'm very hopeful that that piece of legislation will pass.
Okay. I did want to come back to you, Mayor. I wonder if you could talk, you are certainly not the only county mayor in Tennessee that's dealing with these phenomenon. What kind of do you talk to the other county mayors? Like, what kind of forums do you have to discuss these issues and maybe brainstorm about how to handle these challenges?
Yes, I do. In fact, I was in a meeting in Nashville yesterday with all the county mayors from Middle Tennessee. And we talk about, really, we talk more about our growth problems than we do trying to, like trash. We're worried about, like Robson County, we haul our trash all the way up in Nortonville, Kentucky to get rid of it. It's very expensive. We spend about $300,000 a month, and we're a small county population wise. But we try to talk about growth, and because we got to build these schools, and we talk about how we can keep our fund balances where we can borrow enough money to do what the growth is coming. And we do talk, but we don't have a lot of answers. I'm looking right across the hall now, but my UT extension office is right across the road, and I've got 3 county commissioners on that board just so they can spread the word. And these 3 do farm. It's very important. FFA, Future Farmers of America. I went to a conference about 6 months ago, and there was a lot of young women getting into farming. And that was very interesting, different chapters from the high schools. So it's out there. And also the Tennessee Beef Program, you can go and get educated about cattle. And once you get your certificate, the state does have programs where you can buy material, feeders, cattle catchers and everything at a reduced price, and even help you build hay barns. So it's out there for the young farmers if they want to get engaged.
I'll just add, Mayor, there's actually a section within TAEP about beginning farmers. They have an alternative just for beginning farmers, that where they don't have to meet the minimum requirements for the others that you mentioned. And there's a lot of programs that we have other than just beef cattle. It's all of the different enterprises have some type of, they're typically referred to as a master program that you go through and get that training, which will make you eligible for those cost shares that you mentioned.
Thank you. I see we have a few questions coming in from the audience. There's a question from Martin who asks, as the average age of farmers increase, what can we do? Does someone want to tackle that question?
I would just say it's what we mentioned earlier. There's some way that we've got to encourage producers to start discussing this earlier and see if there can be some transition. Are there ways, and what Brooks mentioned earlier about farm length, and that's been discussed. I think that will be discussed tremendously about trying to get some more funding for that, just to make it more known. We do have some cases where farmers do not have any immediate heirs. And are there ways that we can connect the young farming generation maybe with them, or someone that wants to farm through FarmLink or some of those adjoining things? But it's just the general trend over a number of years that the average age of the principal owner of the land keeps getting higher and higher. Historically, it goes up about a year every census cycle. Every 5 years, the average age of the principal owner will go up a year. And that's kind of where we're projecting it'll go over 60 years when we see the 2022 data.
And just to pop in really quick and echo what Kevin said, National Young Farmers Coalition does a survey. The last one was of 10,000 young farmers across the country. And there's a perception out there that young people don't want to farm. And maybe that's true in some instances, but there are a lot of young people who really want to get onto agricultural land. And of those 10,000 farmers that were surveyed in that National Young Farmers Coalition effort, I think 59% who responded said that land access or getting onto a farm is either very or extremely challenging. It's the biggest barrier that most young farmers face. So I just don't want, sometimes there's this perception young people don't want to farm, but that's actually not true. It's just how can we help them do that?
Thanks, Brooks. We have a question from Tim who asks, how does growth impact the act of farming, such as odor, complaints, etc.? Does anyone want to tackle that?
I could probably add a little bit to that. I think in North Carolina, they built a subdivision near a hog farm. And the hog farm ended up getting closed up because of the smell. Here in Robson County, we have tobacco barn smoking right now, which tells me it's football time in Tennessee. And a lot of people, they think it's neat to look at, but they say they can't walk and all that. It hurts their breathing. And I know a farmer down in Montgomery County that had 10 barns on one road, and the schools quit running the school buses down that road, and he finally had to get out of the tobacco business. So yes, it does. Some of the farming, whether it's a lot of them use chicken manure, whatever, spreading for fertilizer to cut fertilizer costs. Yes, it does. Maybe give us a black eye a little bit, but that's part of farming. That's just part of what it is. And most people live around it, know what's going on, but the people moving in don't know what's going on. There's a granary right here in Springfield, and I know a subdivision across the road fuss all the time when he's buying corn, and that little, what you call little white sheddings or whatever, they float over in the neighborhood and get on people's cars. So yes, there is a conflict. It's not really serious, but it does have an effect on people.
Yeah, and I'm sorry for jumping in so much, but I did interview a farmer, actually in Robertson County, so in Mayor Vogel's community, who was talking about the challenges he's faced from this sort of growth all around him. And one story that he had shared was that he was cutting hay on a Saturday before lunch, and his tractor broke down, and he didn't have what he needed to fix it on the farm in that moment. And he said used to, even 10, 15 years ago, he would have gone to a neighbor on a farm and said, hey, can you help me fix my tractor? But he said there's been so much growth around him, he has no more neighbors who are farming. And because there'd been so much growth in his community, there weren't agricultural businesses operating in his close vicinity anymore. He would have had to driven 30 or 40 minutes to get to a dealer or a mechanic to get that issue fixed. So it actually really hurt his hay harvest because he wasn't able to get things repaired because of the way agriculture had waned in his specific area. So it's it's things like the smells and the noise, and it's also those realities of trying to farm in what have become non-agricultural areas.
Paul asks, how can the zoning code in Tennessee cities and counties help with the preservation of farmland? Would it be allowing for smaller lots per unit? Is there a role of having or requiring large lots on prime farmland areas?
Yeah, I think there could be a lot done in the planning and zoning realm. Unfortunately, some of our counties don't even have zoning. So to go to a very progressive zoning code is a big stretch. But I definitely think in our more suburban and rapidly developing counties, there are creative things you can do through zoning. And, we talked about agricultural districts or cluster developments where you leave large tracts of open space intact. Or zones, areas of the county where you set aside those for more rural uses. But it's a hard thing. Probably Cumberland Region tomorrow can talk some about that as well, and the challenges of getting our local county and governments to adopt more comprehensive planning and zoning regulations. But yes, there's a lot that can be done to help protect more farms.
Nita, I've got a question as a mayor. We're fixing to face the solar farms. In fact, there's some people getting leases now from companies about putting their farms in solar farms, and I'm getting calls from a lot of neighbors. They don't mind looking at cows and stuff, but they don't want to look at a bunch of solar panels. And we're drafting new zoning about buffer zones and stuff in case somebody does try to put one next to your house or whatever. But I would like sometime Brooks or somebody give me a insight across this nation about the solar farms. You're really taking land out of production for crops, but that farm is still producing electricity. And I would like to know how people across the nation feel about that.
Yeah, I'll just quickly respond and say, yeah, Mayor Vogel, it's a huge issue across the country. Some data has shown that between now and 2050, and I think this was uh, National Renewable Energy Lab, some maybe I can't remember exactly who put this out, but that 10 million acres of land might be converted to utility scale solar across the U.S. And we need renewable energy, and it's becoming more cost effective. But how we site that is going to be really, really important, and how we make sure that we're supporting rural communities and making sure that they get benefits from doing that instead of just making it an extractive industry. Is going to be really important. American Farmland Trust does have some work on the solar realm if people are interested in checking that out.
And Brooks, I'll jump in with a little bit that the UT Center of Farm Management, we're trying to track and put actual data on farmland loss. We hope to have some county profiles up soon, but we're also at least trying to track the solar facilities that are going in the state. And what we're up to right now, we're approaching about 3,500 acres that's already in solar operation or in being developed in the state that we know of right now.
We have a question from Paula, which is how can we manage incompatible adjacent land use? I'm assuming adjacent to farmland. Does anyone want to tackle that question?
I mean, I think it comes back to something we've mentioned several times, which is planning and zoning. You know, people are, and Mayor Vogel talked about this, how many people are moving into agricultural areas and not continuing agricultural uses. And it creates, a whole variety of issues. So I guess that's what her question's getting at, incompatible adjacent uses.
We have a question from John about conservation developments. Is there a way to encourage them through policy or other means? I think he's talking about things like agri-hoods or other conservation developments. Does anyone want to tackle that one? Okay, can maybe move on from that one. So a question from Paul. Does running high-speed internet in rural areas cause more demand for there might be a typo in this question, but the way it's written is, does it cause more demand for non-farming uses in the rural areas? Non-farming, I'm sorry. Does it cause more demand for non-farming uses in rural areas?
I'll try to chip in on that. Personally, I don't think it does. I think it gives maybe a farmer a chance that his wife could work at home and make extra income to keep him in farming. I don't think people using the internet, or I've got out in my area now, we've got access to it, and I don't think it's done anything to hurt farming. That's my opinion. Somebody else may have a different one. The infrastructure, the main thing is water and sewer. That's where you're going to lose your farmland. If sewer was out my way, there'd be houses everywhere. Let me tell you, Davidson County, Nashville, one time had farms all over, and now they're zoning that place by the foot. So as we lose this land, they're going to come to us, regardless of whether it's got sinkholes or whatever, and try to do what they can. We do in Robson County. I have a county engineer hired, and whenever a developer brings a plat for subdivision, he goes over every foot of it. And if there's places there that the house cannot be built because of water runoff or whatever, we don't let them build houses in. And we're trying to protect the people that are moving here, but we're also trying to protect the land. I think in Williamson County, they went to 5-acre lots is the smallest you could buy to try to slow down the growth. But then the farmers in Robson County do not like 5-acre lots being sold because they say it takes too big a chunk out. So it's dang if you do and dang if you don't. Well, I'm back to the way I can say it. But I don't think internet really hurts the rural area.
We're still taking questions if anyone would like to submit some, but I thought of an issue that I don't think we've really covered, and I wondered if any one of you would want to jump in about the economic impact of agriculture. So when Brooks is talking about, or when he spoke about a projection of our state potentially losing 1 million acres of farmland by 2040, what does that mean in terms of the economic contributions of agriculture, either in Tennessee or sort of more broadly? Is there anyone who wants to speak to that?
I'll speak to it really quickly, Anita. And actually, to reference Kevin and UT Extension, a few years ago, UT Extension did an economic impact analysis for every county in the state in terms of their agricultural economic impact. And it's amazing to find those 1 or 2 page findings and look at the millions upon millions of dollars that agriculture yields in communities. It's really fascinating and eye-opening to see just how important that is. I think it may have been in conjunction with Cumberland Region Tomorrow. I can't remember for sure, but I think UT also did a study on just the value of open land. And that is really impactful too, not only farmland, but parkland and forest land and what all sorts of services that provides. And then just one quick thing, and Mayor Vogel touched on this really well earlier, so it's kind of just repeating what he shared. But on the local level, a lot of communities think that growth automatically means more revenue for their communities and their counties. And in some ways it does, because you get more property tax revenue and those sorts of things. But the more homes you add, the more services you have to provide, as Mayor Vogel said, with adding more schools and fire protection and stoplights and roads and sewage systems. And the list goes on for a long time. And so American Farmland Trust has done a lot of what we call cost of community services studies, where you look at how much a land use brings in versus how much you expend to provide services to those areas. And we have shown consistently across the country, including a few in Tennessee, that for every dollar of revenue brought in by an agricultural land use, it takes 25 to 30 cents to provide services to those areas. And then for every dollar brought in by residential areas, it takes $1.10, $1.20, $1.30 to provide services to those areas. So it can actually be a net loss for economic and local coffers. So it's something to think about as we're thinking about the economic future of a lot of our, especially our rural and peri-urban communities.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up, Brooks, and how that study, and we've actually updated that data. It actually looks at every county from production agriculture and also the manufacturer of ag-related that takes the inputs and adds to that, which is very important across the state too. But to address the economic impact, we've had this discussion within the Center of Farm Management, and it's just not, how do you define the economic impact from the loss of 1 acre? And it could be tremendous difference between class 1 soils, like some of that good cropland up there in your area, Mayor, or what we're talking about, Blue Oval in West Tennessee, versus some rolling hillside pasture or forest land or different class soils there. So it really, you have to weigh what type of production is being taken out to kind of get an economic impact of the future.
Thanks. We have another question. This one is for Emily, from Paul. Do land trusts ever work with cities in monitoring the open space conservation subdivisions?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I'm assuming Paul knows a lot about conservation subdivisions, it sounds like, but So yes, there can be areas of open space set aside. So let's say a developer wants to develop a parcel of land and maybe work what a conservation subdivision would be, usually, clustering the development in one area of the property and conserving a large amount of open space. The open space amount depends on the local regulations and all that. But there are times when we have worked with developers who want to conserve a significant amount of open space as part of a greater development project. That can be done working directly with us on a conservation easement, or it can be done through the planning process. So, the city, county might approve their subdivision and say, this is approved with X amount of acres being an open space. So in the first example, if a developer worked directly with us to do a conservation easement on that open space, then yes, it would become our responsibility to monitor and enforce that conservation easement. In the case where that's done through the planning process, and their plat is approved through the local planning process, and that open space is platted, that would not be a role where the land trust comes in. It would be more up to, the local entity, the HOA potentially, to make sure that area stays in open space. Hope that makes sense.
I had a question, and this is also open to all of you, about the role of educating the wider public about the importance of agriculture, of our agricultural lands, our agricultural heritage, and of its, the rate at which it is disappearing. The mayor talked about people who want to come in and build those houses on 3 acres or 5 acres or 10 acres. And I'm not sure that it's anyone's role to talk people out of those desires, but I also wonder if a piece of preventing such, all this loss is public education, what's been going on, and what you all think might be done along those lines.
That's a good question. I don't know what we can do when, it's like I said, you can't tell people they can't sell their land, or, if 100 acres is auctioned off tomorrow in Robinson County, usually most of the buyers are not going to be able to, they'll bid on it, but they won't get it. But whoever buys that is going to be planning on developing it at today's prices. And it's like, okay, you can't buy it, you're going to develop it. I'd rather say this guy, that's we're not at that point yet. I don't know if we'll ever get to that point of stopping who buys land and what, but I tell you, the whole secret is infrastructure. Where there's no infrastructure, you won't have to worry about development. But as we move out and companies move out infrastructure, that's everybody says, what's Robinson County's growth plan? I said, really, we don't have one, because when a city moves outside its city limits with the infrastructure, all right, there's your growth plan right there. They've got it now where you can develop it. So that's a tough question, and I don't know that anybody in this board can answer that question. If they can, I want to hear it too.
Yes, I've got just a couple thoughts to share. I think one thing is that for a lot of folks, and understandably so, farming is not front of mind all the time until something happens when it becomes front of mind. If we look back to the beginning of the pandemic and we all went to the grocery store and there wasn't a whole lot of food on the shelves, then people started thinking about farms and local farms and buying from local farmers. And part of me is actually afraid that we've already forgotten that lesson. And it was just 2 or 3 years ago about the importance of supporting our local farms. And so trying to educate, I think, as you asked, Anita, and help people understand why this is so important is key. I think that can be done through things like op-eds in not only big papers like the Tennessean or the Commercial Appeal or the Times Free Press, but also our local county papers, trying to share why agriculture is important there. I think it's done through events like this, through other things at groups like Cumberland Region Tomorrow Greater Nashville Regional Council are doing, and really just trying to have an open conversation and make it a conversation, be able to share something and then take questions and really, talk back and forth and not just talk at someone, but really be able to show why farming and farmland and new and beginning farmers and small and mid-sized farms, why all of these things are so important.
I guess the other question I have, if you all do have examples of this, are there models, even small scale models in other states that are working in communities to kind of preserve that agricultural land?
I think of this might not be the best example for Tennessee, but I think of Vermont. And I actually went up there to get my master's degree, but they've done a lot of very interesting things through the work of their local land trust, local zoning and planning regulations, statewide regulations. There's just a lot of interesting policies that have been used in Vermont. And then if we want to look to a more local example, I think North Carolina is doing a lot of great work to use, various grant funds to increase the pace and the quality of land conservation all across North Carolina. And so I think if you want to look to a Southeastern example, that would be a great one to look to. Brooks, I don't know if you had one that jumped to mind either, but.
I was gonna shout out North Carolina. They have an entire farmland preservation division within their Department of Agriculture that's doing really, really good work. American Farmland Trust is leading a project in Virginia to help communities plan for agriculture by creating a Virginia-specific toolkit that communities can pick up and use the parts that's relevant for them in order to envision a future for ag in their community. So I think those sorts of things would be great to bring to Tennessee. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of options for things that we could do and follow the examples put into play in other states.
And we haven't actually mentioned the role of the federal government in supporting farmers. Are there things on the horizon? Are there policies being debated at the national level to keep farmers in business?
Yeah, so right now we're in Farm Bill negotiations, which is done usually every 5 years or so, and it's the biggest bill and the biggest spending affecting agriculture across the country. There are a few specific things in that I'm excited about. One, there's a bill actually that has been recently introduced to keep corporations from buying up lots and lots of agricultural land. That is something that is interesting to me. It echoes some of the things that Mayor Vogel and Kevin were saying earlier. That Office of Small Farms is something I'm really, really excited about and very hopeful about. I think that is desperately needed. There's also things, if we're talking about farmland protection, there's a program called the ACEP program, Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, where the federal government will provide dollars to purchase conservation easements. It'd be great to see funding increased for that. It would be great to see Tennessee get more of that funding. It's a really difficult process to go through to apply, but it can be really useful where you can make it work. And so it'd be nice to be able to see some of that put into play more actively here.
Yeah, speaking of that agency, so under USDA is the Natural Resource Conservation Service. They provide a tremendous amount of support, whether for permanent land conservation or to help farmers put good conservation practices, fencing, buffers, farm plans, all sorts of things come through, those agencies that can be a big help to farmers.
Okay, I think we're going to wrap up the discussion. Thank you, everybody, for offering your expertise and insight. And And also thank you all who tuned in and participated in this conversation, which I hope keeps going in your various arenas. CRT will be hosting another Power of 10 Summit on November 9th. And you can get more information from the CRT website about that. Thanks again. We really appreciate you tuning in.
Thank you for attending the Power of 10. We hope you enjoyed today's discussion. Have a great day.